My specialty is that terrible four-letter word starting with F, F-E-A-R. Fantasy expectations appearing real. It's what happens up here, isn't it? And I had a terrible thing happen to me when I was very young. I had to get up in front of an audience, a terrifying audience like this one here, and I had a terrible failure situation, which left me with a terrible fear of getting up and speaking in front of people. And for years, at school, I had a few more failures, which reinforced the terrible fear that I had. Only years later, I looked back and saw I developed a phobia. It wasn't just a fear, it was a terrible phobia. And there's one way we can deal with fears or phobias. We can avoid it, run and hide in a corner somewhere, or at some part of our life, we might have to ask, what am I going to do about it? I've got a choice. And a book that I saw some years ago was this one, Power to Choose by Hayden Sargent. He used to live in Brisbane, he was on television. But it's a basic choice. We all have a choice. We can come along to a session like this or we can go somewhere else today. So I finally had to come to the determination I was going to do something about it. So step by step, I joined a club, Toastmasters club, that Lionel ironically had founded many years ago. He founded many clubs in Brisbane. And then I got the opportunity to come to the centre here and help people to get over their fear of speaking in public. This led on to looking at the whole subject of fear, nervousness, anxiety and panic. And as Lionel said, I worked with Marge Garrett for some years and we had some very interesting interaction, people coming and looking at their fears and their phobias and how they could overcome it. So I've got 2 sessions that are running at the moment, as you'll see on page 6, March the 28th, Saturday afternoon, 2 to 4:30, Fear and Worry, Finding Solutions. Looking at very practical, we all can have very, very different fears, but how do we start to deal with them and find solutions to our fears? And I've got some very practical things that we can do to start to get things back into, and I like that word that this young man used before, balance. And that's what we're trying to get, is a balance in our life. So I had suffered, and I certainly knew and understood fear and what it did to us. At the age of 16 or 14, I fell in love for the first time with an aeroplane. And I learnt to fly at 16. I didn't ever have a fear of flying. I had a very healthy respect for not crashing and how not to crash it. And I flew for 35 years. I was with Ansett for the last 20 years. I was flying a 737. And Ansett crashed, but I didn't. And I didn't leave anyone up there. They all came back down in the same order that they went up, thankfully. But I do understand the fear that people can have with aviation and flying. We've reached an incredible era. My father was born October the 4th, 1903. 10 weeks before the Wright brothers took to the air. 66 years later, we watched man land on the moon on an old black and white TV. 66 years from nothing to the moon. It's mind-boggling. The same year, 1969, 2 amazing things happened. The first flight of a jumbo jet and the Concorde. The Concorde going across the Atlantic would do it in about 4.5 hours at the speed of a .22 bullet. Unbelievable human progress. Right this second, we've got 10,000 jets flying around the Earth 24/7, carrying on average 1.2 million people. And they do it very, very safely. And that's no accident, because the history of aviation has been written in blood, but from every accident we've learnt how to do it safer. Here in Australia, for example, modern jets came in about 1963. Touch wood, not one fatal airline jet accident in Australia's aviation history. And day in and day out, dedicated engineers, refuelers, maintenance people of all sorts, and the pilots and cabin crew work to keep that incredible safety record. So we go through a lot of this, and it gives people that might have some hesitation an opportunity to ask questions. I was a volunteer presenter on the Answered Fear of Flying program when they had that. And you can just see fear melt away as people get answers to, what about turbulence? Won't the wings fall off? Do pilots drink and drive? Drink and flight? Do they take drugs? All these any questions that people want to ask, I can usually provide an answer for out of my experience, and it really helps them to see that it is a very safe way to travel, and they can deal with their fears and phobias. As Lionel said, we had one man ring up, he couldn't attend the session, so I took some time and I gave him a crash course by phone, and he came back and he rang me back and he said, oh, I've been to Holland and back, and he said it was fantastic. And I said, what did you do? And he told me what he did, and I said, would you like to come along and tell our course one night? And he did. He came, and for 5 minutes he told exactly what he did based on my suggestions and how well it went for him. So there are answers. Just remember that fear, where does fear happen? It doesn't happen out there. It happens between there and there. But the other thing to keep in perspective is we've got to learn how not to jump at shadows and catastrophize. Keep it all in perspective. And do you think that we have to be totally relaxed before we do something that we might fear? No. The secret is to feel the fear and do it anyway. But you need help to get to that point where you can feel the fear and do it anyway. So Saturday, March the 28th, 2 p.m. to 4:30 for fear, worry, finding solutions. Then the next weekend, same time on a Saturday afternoon, 2 to 4:30, the fear of flying. So any questions that people have got, you might know people that would like to learn more, or just sit in and listen. They can book and come along. How's the time running, Lionel?
Very close.
Any questions that you might have? Yes, Paul.
Sometimes you've got a fear and it's a situation, something bad is going to happen. How do you just
I've missed the first bit.
Sometimes you have a fear.
Yes.
But it's actually like a buzzing or whatever. It's an
Like a premonition?
like a gut feeling, something's
Okay.
and how do you generally?
Well, that's an interesting one, because I do get gut feelings, but it's usually based on practical situations that are happening around me that cause me to say, no, I'm not going to walk through there between those cars. No, that's a bit risky. And I tried to avoid risk, as my wife here, Linda, knows. I tried to avoid financial or physical pain. Both hurt. I don't know which one hurts more. So if I get a premonition or a gut feel that no, this could be harmful, but then you've got to watch out that we don't build mental mountains of fear, and then we've got to physically climb over it. It's a pretty hard one to distinguish, but my last word would be, if you're going to panic, do it slowly. Thank you, Lionel.